coming out and getting to meet Rebecca McWilliams. Sometimes the universe gives you what you need. Not all that often, but every once in a while it does. And the day after the debate between Biden and Trump, I needed something in my life. Running for the Democratic ticket for state senator, and I didn't know any of them, and one of them was Rebecca. And I have to tell you, I was impressed by everyone, but the person that stood out for me was Rebecca McWilliams. And the universe on that day lifted me from a little bit of despair, gave me some hope, a belief in our future, and it was just what I needed. So I am so happy now to introduce Rebecca McWilliams to you. For those people that have not seen Rebecca yet, haven't heard her, you're in for a treat. And Rebecca, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. It's my pleasure to host you, and thank you to the sponsors who've invited people personally to come out tonight. It means the world to me. My name is Representative Rebecca McWilliams. For the past 6 years, I've been a state rep for wards 1 through 8 in Concord. So if you're in one of those wards, I was lucky enough to be your rep for the last 6 years or so. We had some redistricting, some things changed, but I've covered wards 1 through 8 at some point. I just want to build on the story that Barbara was telling. When people ask how are things going with the campaign, I say, we're out knocking doors every night. Well, let me tell you, there has been a significant shift in the reception that my team has received knocking doors now that Harris is our nominee. It is just amazing. So I just want to give a shout out to the Democrats of Concord, Bow, and Hopkinton who are now in it to win it on the federal ticket. I think this is just so invigorating. So thank you all for opening your doors and hearts and being excited again about democracy, because for a little while I think we were really dragging. A little bit about me and my personal story. I'm a mom of 3 kids. Their names are George, Becca, and Tori. They're 7, 7, and 3. George and Becca go to Abbott Downing, and Tori is in childcare. She goes to Casa Bambini and Bow. So public ed and childcare are 2 very important things to me in New Hampshire because I'm living it right now. I'm also an architect and an attorney. I went back to school to become a lawyer after deciding that I really love construction contracts. I know your eyes are going to glaze over, but to me that's really fun. And I also really love public policy and bills, so there's something going on there. I work as a risk manager for a large construction firm here in Concord. And my husband and I own and run the Lewis Farm, which is on the Bow-Concord line, and it's a compost operation. So he runs that. I do the social media. He actually runs the machines and does the composting. We also host sheep, and we have some Christmas trees that'll be ready in about 5 years. So we're planning for the future with the farm. So we moved to Concord 8 years ago because we really love the outdoor environment, and we wanted to raise our kids somewhere that they would appreciate the outdoors. And I think that that's important to note. I think I really am an environmentalist at heart, and that's part of my lived values, is really appreciating the fact that I'm raising my kids on a farm, and I care deeply for New Hampshire's environment. So I would just want you to know that my team, including Carissa Carreau, who sang you in today, is really my superpower as both a candidate and a mom who works and serves as a legislator. It's about my team. So I'm able to do this because I'm surrounded by people who support me, and huge shout out to my husband who's with the kids tonight. I couldn't do what I do without a supportive team and spouse. So shout out to everybody else who has those support structures. And I want to be clear, if you want something done, ask a busy mom and she'll get it done. It's true. So I'm that busy mom. I'm also the schools. I grew up in Connecticut. I went to public schools, K through 12. Public schools are my passion. My mom actually worked at the local elementary school when I was growing up. My dad was an insurance adjuster, working parents. I'm a middle child, number 2 of 4. So that means I'm always looking for equity and fairness. This may be why I went back to law school, because I wanted things to be fair and I didn't always see fairness. So as a middle kid, I think that whenever I'm working in the legislature, I'm looking for what's fair for all, because I'm a middle kid, and that's one of my values. I'm also deeply empathetic. I'm a good listener, and I have lived experience. I've been at the bottom of the barrel, and I'm currently a working mom. I'm not wealthy. I'm not here running on my own money, and I think that matters when we talk about experience. So I believe in fighting for folks who've been excluded. So to that end, as a white woman and as a mom, I believe in using my privilege to support those who don't necessarily have representation. A large part of that has been the battle for LGBTQ continued rights, and also, unfortunately, fighting against a lot of these horrible anti-trans bills. The governor signed 2 of them this summer, and that is a huge piece of what I want to continue fighting for you as your senator, to remove all of that horrible, horrible, bigoted legislation that has passed. So, thank you. In addition, we currently have a Sununu abortion ban that went into effect. It's a 6-month abortion ban. And although New Hampshire is all about living free, except if you're pregnant, 4 years ago, I suffered a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, and I almost died. So the doctors at Concord Hospital were able to save my life, and I was very grateful for that. But if that had happened today, and if that had happened in Texas today, I could be dead. And I consider myself fortunate. I have insurance, I have support, but still, we're dealing with a battle against reproductive rights that impacts everybody. And sometimes we don't even realize what the implications are. So I want everyone to know that reproductive rights have been an issue for me since day one. I was working to put in a constitutional amendment for bodily autonomy before the fall of Roe v. Wade. I was still fighting to push that at our state before all of this went way haywire. So that's still a core value of mine, and that's really important that we work to end the Sununu abortion ban, and also make sure that we can constitutionally guarantee that everyone has the right to medical autonomy in our state. That's really important to me. Thank you again. So moving on to housing, which is my other hat. This is my architect hat. We need 90,000 new units by 2040. That's the number we're expecting we're going to need housing for in order to continue growing our economy and to fill the jobs that we have and that we project. New Hampshire has a history of a lot of not in my backyard NIMBY zoning at individual municipalities. About 50 years worth of NIMBY zoning that is very difficult to overcome in order to build more units. So we have a lot of cities and towns that have insisted on 2, 4, 8, 10-acre lot minimums. I will tell you that we will not get to 90,000 new housing units with 2-acre lot minimums and ranch houses. That's just not going to happen. So we need to fix zoning across the state level. And that's something I've been working on as a state representative. I sponsored legislation to allow duplexes and accessory dwelling units in our existing single-family zoned areas across the state. And I'm also proud to say that one of the bills that I sponsored, House Bill 1400 for parking reform, will be signed into law very soon. I'm expecting in the next couple of days. So there's some movement to at least enable fewer parking spaces for multifamily housing, so that if you know 2 parking spaces equals 1 studio apartment, every 2 parking spaces you can take away is a potential another studio apartment footprint for building more of these 90,000 units, especially in areas that we already have the infrastructure. So we have water, we have sewer, electricity, we have cable, we have paved roads. It makes sense to start adding units within the footprints that we already have the services. So I believe that a roof over everyone's head is a fundamental human right, and I'm going to continue to advocate for our missing middle housing, 1 to 4 units in places that we have infrastructure, so we can fix zoning at the state level, and that would reduce the property tax burden for everyone, because if we have a duplex, that's a 50% right there on that lot instead of a 100% tax burden. That's good for all of us. I mentioned childcare at the beginning. I think childcare and housing are tied. Our childcare industry took a serious hit during COVID. I think you all know this. We don't have enough centers or home-based businesses to meet our current demand for families in the state. So when I was elected 6 years ago, I had just found daycare for the twins, just then, and we had been waitlisted. So it was nerve-wracking because I didn't know if I would be able to get care and coverage for my children if I was going to start going to the State House and attending hearings and having to be there to vote. That was really challenging. Fortunately, the House put together a special committee on childcare. So over the last 2 years, I have served as a member of the Special Committee on Childcare, and I introduced a bill to accept federal that would provide bridge funding, basically benefits, so health care, dental, retirement savings for people who work in the child care industry and right now don't have those benefits, but in order to stay there and stay employed, they would want that for a long-term job plan rather than moving on to another job that pays more and may have benefits. And then often in cases that turns out to be like a retail job such as Starbucks, because they can jump from childcare to Starbucks and get the benefits. So what's the point in staying in childcare? You know, with the Special Committee on Childcare, we surveyed people across the state. We talked to people who own childcare facilities, and we were told, this is a direct quote, "We can't survive on love alone." And so there is this pressing need for financial help to bridge the gap between what families can pay and what we need to actually pay people who work in the child care business. Because there's a huge gulf, and we just see so many people leaving the field right now, it's hard to keep it going. So that's a big priority. As an architect, I have a vision for the future of our state. We need to focus on ending our addiction to natural gas and oil and incentivize up to 5 megawatts of solar and hydro and wind, right? Renewable energy, solar, hydro, wind, and where we can do it, we'll even take geothermal if it's possible. I know we're the granite state, but there's some geothermal possibilities out there. So we need to incentivize 5 megawatts for everyone. I've brought forth a 5 megawatt bill just about every year that I've been in the legislature, and it's always really close. But I think this year is going to be the year that we get enough Democrats to put that over the finish line. So let's get 5 megawatts for all of renewable energy. We're also really proud of the work that I did with Sierra Club to shut down the Merrimack Station and end coal in New Hampshire by 2028. That was a big win. So thank you, Sierra Club, for your legal expertise. And thank you to everyone in this room who was involved in fighting that fight, because it matters. We don't need coal. So the next battle is now unfolding. We've got serial polluters. I think you know some of them. Saint-Gobain, Casella. They're polluting with forever chemicals in our water and soil. We've got PFAs and PFOAs, PFAS, PFOAs. These are forever chemicals that cause cancer. We know we can't get rid of them. They just have to be removed and encapsulated. And we know where they're coming from. The question is, do we have the political will to hold these polluting companies accountable for their own pollution and make them pay to clean it up and make them pay for the human costs that they are causing? And I believe we do, and I believe that that is my biggest vote that I will take in the next 2 years, is about PFAS and how New Hampshire handles PFAS for the next 20, 50, 100 years. So this is an environmental battle, and this seat is really the crux to take more out-of-state waste that we don't need, and we aren't creating that much waste in New Hampshire, let's be honest. A new landfill would be for out-of-state waste. What that means directly for this district is if we open a new landfill, we will get 5 million gallons of landfill leachate with PFAS in it showing up at Hall Street to be processed every year. And the scary part about that is that we know some of that ends up in the Merrimack River. So that's going to be on us to come up with a way to remediate that. We don't need that. We need to end PFAS in New Hampshire, and we need to do it this year. I'm just wrapping up for those of you who have to leave early. Public education's under attack. I think you all know this. It continues to hurt our hardworking Granite State families. We have the data. 97% of voucher recipients had already left our state's public schools by the time they received voucher funds. So this is welfare for the wealthy, and the GOP is intentionally defunding our public schools. So now you're paying twice. Once for private voucher-based education, and then again to keep public schools open for the rest of our kids. I will work to repeal vouchers immediately and also vote for a baseline adequate education funding, at least Yes, thank you. At least the court ordered $7,356 per person at a minimum as your next senator. Thanks. As the most progressive candidate in the race, I'm fighting for New Hampshire's working families to thrive. We need a living minimum wage of at least $22 an hour in New Hampshire, not federally. We need to stop cutting capital gains and business profits taxes. We know that these cuts only benefit the wealthy and they increase our property taxes for all of us. I've consistently fought for a state minimum wage and to end the sub-minimum tipped wage. I sponsored and passed the New Hampshire Medicaid dental benefit. I passed IVF insurance coverage for state employees, and I worked with Senator Becky Whitley to pass the Momnibus bill for moms' postpartum Medicaid coverage as part of last year's budget. I support returning union pension funding to the state rather than local municipalities because we already know under the education funding debates, lawsuits, that Berlin and Claremont don't have the tax base to support the same level of benefits as the wealthy towns do. So fairness, again, middle child, fairness matters. So I'm in this fight to build an economy that works for all, and I appreciate your help as we work to win this seat over the next 4 weeks. So knowing that some people wanted to leave early, I'm happy to take questions, but I do want to prioritize folks who wanted to get a little bit of an edge if they need to leave. I saw one hand in the back and one hand on the edge. Do you want to go first?
Yes. You didn't touch on the homeless and what you would do about that. I have a friend of mine that has a voucher, but he can't find affordable housing. He has a voucher for $1,100.
Yep. Yeah.
And most of the housing is $1,200 or above.
Agree. Yeah. So affordable housing and the homeless issue, I think they're all tied together because the cost of housing has increased significantly because of changes after COVID, right? We've seen the market completely shifted with people moving to the state from elsewhere and people working from home and then improving their homes. But there's a lot that's changed the market. On the homeless and the affordable housing issue, I do support a plan that would require affordable housing as a percentage of new developments. And not just a fund to put the money in, but actually make them affordable, hold the developers accountable. If they're going to put in 100 units, garden-style apartments, I want a percentage of that to be guaranteed affordable, and I want to make sure that it's always going to be that way in perpetuity. I think that that's a step in the right direction. Again, homelessness is a complicated issue because it involves resources from multiple towns. So the district is Bow, Hopkinton, and Concord. And I will tell you, we're seeing a lot more homeless in Concord than we're seeing in Bow and Hopkinton. But the issue is still a New Hampshire issue, right? So it's about getting resources from multiple communities to come together and contribute in order to provide a roof as a human right over everybody's head. I know Concord has the Coalition to End supportive of the work that our City Councilor Jim Schlosser has been doing to advance what we're providing for services in Concord. But at the state level, we still need to make sure that when we do these developments, a percentage must be set aside as affordable. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Was there a question in the back?
Yeah, hi, my name is Josie Black, and I'm very inclined to vote for you. However, I feel that we have 3 really great candidates. So I was wondering if you could say what distinguishes you from them, so that I feel good about myself.
Oh, sure, happy to. So first, I'm in the midst of it. I'm in the thick of it. I've been a state rep for 6 years, and I've been doing the work and working with my colleagues across the aisle and across the wall, so on the Senate and on the GOP side, in order to pass really good bills. I went back through my record because I had to fill out a survey about environment and energy bills. I have filed 66 environment or energy related bills in the last 6 years. Of all the bills that I've filed, only 14 have actually turned into law, but of that, I would say 5 years we were pretty much in the minority. So 14 bills in 5 years is nothing to shake your head at. So the data says I'm a hard worker and I get stuff done. I'm also in the middle of it, and I know the team, I know who I'm working with, I know how to get it done. Big picture, I have to be honest, I have a vision for the future of this district, and that includes a PFAS-free New Hampshire, but also how we really want to see Concord, Bow, and Hopkinton expanding, and how housing could go with state support in the next 10 years. So that's really important to me to be able to see through a plan for that. I also have a plan for transportation, including electric buses, to really meet the needs of people who are not able to drive, who I think are underserved in the state. So there's some forward thinking and planning for what can really happen with somebody with vision in this seat in Concord. And then last, I will just leave this where it lies. I am not tied to any lobbyists. Other questions? Yeah? A tough crowd here. All right, well, oh, one over here, yes.
So in the paper, you visited the Casella site for an activist type event. Tell me about that.
Sure, I went to visit Forest Lake, which is actually the oldest state park in the state. It was preserved right turn of the century. Forest Lake is a beautiful, pristine lake that doesn't have any chemicals in it right now. People swim in it. There's a playground and a sandy beach, and kids play there. The proposed expansion landfill site for Casella is right next to Forest Lake. So we know that landfills eventually leak. They can use all kinds of special membranes to put down and try to protect the ground underneath, but at some point the membrane gets punctured or it degrades, and the landfill will leak leachate into the groundwater, and in this case, into Forest Lake. So we're talking about siting a facility that should never be anywhere near water, immediately adjacent to water, and it's a public park. So this is, I mean, why would we ever do this? It seems like Casella is really flexing their muscles and saying, we know the right people, we can do whatever we want, and we're going to do it. And so we need people who will stand up to Casella and say, no, you won't, not on my watch. Yeah. Oh, question from right behind, and then you're next.
Yeah, you go through the issues so fast. I mean, you have so many of them. It makes you different than a lot of other candidates who are kind of vague. But I just wanted you to slow down a little bit about the healthcare stuff. I didn't catch what you want to do in terms of healthcare. I think you mentioned 3 or 4 things.
Well, reproductive rights. I think we want to repeal the Sununu abortion ban, which is a 6-month ban right now. In addition, adding a constitutional amendment to guarantee medical autonomy for all. So no one else can force you to force you to donate an organ. This touches on not just women's rights, this is human rights for medical decisions. I do support healthcare for all. I think big picture, my plan involves doing a New England exchange for healthcare to provide just base coverage for everyone in the New England market. Modeled on the Massachusetts model, but with a much broader reach. Because, of course, with insurance, the way you actually make it work is by having many, many participants. If you don't have enough people in the pool, it doesn't financially pan out. So looking at a New England model for healthcare for all, I think is very important to me, and I think that is a 10-year plan. There was a question up front. Yes?
I just wanted to speak to Rebecca's diplomacy and kindness in saying that she is not taking any money or is in no way connected to any lobbyists. And this is a little bit of a disclosure that I feel really strongly about, or I wouldn't be doing it. I would be kind and diplomatic the way our wonderful Rebecca was. But one of the candidates who was running against Rebecca in the Democratic race for New Hampshire Senate is married to a lobbyist for Casella Waste Management. So stick that in your mouth and try to swallow it. Tara Reardon, his husband, Jim Brewery, is a lobbyist for Casella Waste Management. I don't like that. And I can't help feeling that in some ways it definitely reflects on where she will take her stand on some of these things, and we already have enough of what's happening in terms of the whole waste management industry weighing heavily on the regulations or lack thereof.
Agreed. Thank you, Martha May. She says things I won't say. Thanks, Martha. You may. That means the world to me. Oh, question in the back here.
Have you given thought to passing a bill that would require mandates for any reproductive care? I know some private insurers obviously don't insure abortion or other reproductive health care services, and I was just wondering if that's something that might be on your agenda.
So let me repeat the question. Would I be open to passing a bill that mandates insurance to cover reproductive care, even for private insurers? Let me give you some background on this. I fought really hard to make sure that all state employees were able to access IVF benefits because personally I had my twins through IVF, and also I believe if anyone wants to have kids, it should be something that doesn't cost them exorbitant sums of money. My kids turned 2 and I was done paying off their IVF bills because I didn't have insurance at the time. So I think insurance coverage is really important for reproductive care, and I'm happy to have a conversation about that. I think I'm a little cautious because I've seen in several other states where there's a huge pushback for religious employers who want to have the ability to say yes or no under their own insurance. So with some research, I think there's probably a way to find how to make it happen, but I can't say yes absolutely without doing some research, and that's just who I am. I'm pretty cautious on these things. So yes, let's talk. Question over here.
Bowen Hopkinton, I think of them as wealthier, although there are some wealthy people in Concord too. But when it comes to zoning, trying to change zoning, won't you have a lot of, I mean, if you're representing these 3 communities, are you going to be able to push for zoning changes that wealthy people might not want? Like, you know, requiring less land per house, for instance. I bet they wouldn't like that.
You know, we've been working at it for 4 years. To repeat the question, will it be possible to push towns like Bowen Hopkinton that have large tracts of land and may have zoned them to be by right large tracts of land and not allowed to be reduced? Will I get pushback? Will it be possible to force some of these towns to accept changes to zoning as a blanket mandate at the state level? I've been working on it for 4 years, first with the Municipal and County Government Committee, which was a dead end. Municipal and county government was very much local control. There's no way to change anything at the state level for local decisions. The Special Committee on Housing, for the last 2 years at the House, has really been much more open to state level changes to fix the pendulum that has swung way over to one side about zoning and try to bring it back to the center to be fair across the state. And that may mean stepping on some toes of wealthy folks. Again, just because the zoning says that it must be a certain number of acres doesn't mean that an individual landowner must subdivide. You can still do what you want with your own property. It simply means that next generation, if you have a 10-acre parcel that was originally zoned to be single-family residential 10-acre parcels only, after a state change comes through, it may be allowable to subdivide that into 5 2-acre parcels. But again, it's your land, you can do what you want with it. So we're not sticking a finger in the eye of anyone. We're trying to incentivize additional development when people are ready to make a decision about what to do with their property.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Oh, up front.
So I'd like to appeal to your middle child sense of fairness. And it's so unfair, it's such a big problem that some communities don't have enough money to fund good schools and other communities have no problem funding really good public schools. What are some of the first things that you think New Hampshire should do to address that inequality?
Wow. Well, I would start with local property taxes going to local schools. I have a real concern about the way we're funding with local tax to local school. Can you not hear?
No, when you are answering your question, you lower your voice.
Oh, sorry.
Keep it back up.
I'll turn it back up. The question was about funding schools. Did everyone hear the question? So in terms of how we can appropriately fund schools for fairness, I have a real concern about using local property taxes for local schools. It hasn't worked. It doesn't work. We need to fix fundamentally the way that we fund schools so that it's fair. I believe that a history teacher teaching 8th grade history should get paid the same whether they work in Concord or Franklin or Londonderry. I believe that salary should be the same, and it should be paid by the state, not the local municipal taxes. So that's part of the funding, okay? Yeah. Thanks. But big picture, we also have to repeal vouchers. Repeal vouchers, right? Vouchers are just bleeding off money. We need to repeal vouchers in order to have the funds to do this, because we're just bleeding money, welfare for the wealthy. We're bleeding money off into home, private, and religious schools, and we don't need to. Families are able to do that on their own without state dollars and our own tax money. And then big picture, in terms of what else we can do for education and for fairness, I mentioned that I want to do baseline funding based on the lawsuit that was recently decided in the lower court, approximately $7,300 per pupil guaranteed, and that is legislation to guarantee that as a baseline for each student in public school. That would really increase our ability to provide the level of education and adequate education that we constitutionally are required to do.
But 7,000 is only about a third of what we actually spend.
It's true.
So it's not adequate.
It's a start. We're at 4,000 now, so I mean we're almost doubling. We got to take baby steps on this one. I do believe in decriminalization and taxation of cannabis. I do think we can use that funding for our public schools, and I also believe that we should be reinstating some of these taxes that have been removed. The business profits tax, we need to put that back. Some of these taxes that we've taken away only benefit a very small percentage of Granite Staters who were paying them to begin with, and the intention was to benefit things like public schools with this money from the super wealthy. So again, I am the most progressive candidate in the state, and if I start sounding like Elizabeth Warren, you'll know why. Question over here.
Years ago, when I think that something was passed for real estate taxes, all the towns, and then the idea was that the rich towns, some of that money would go to the poor towns, and then the rich towns got together, and I don't understand what law, but somehow they keep now the extra money. Can that be undone, or is that like something that should just be ignored and move on? Or?
Oh, I feel like you're setting me up on this. The answer is yes, of course. Any law that we put on the books, 2 years later, could completely change again. The integration and working through our departments takes a little while, but yes, we are not wedded to very wealthy towns keeping their own tax revenue, and in some cases using it for road maintenance, and it's supposed to be for schools. I think that is just not working for the state. We know it's not working. We've seen it not work. And yet we need the political will to say, let's fix this now. Let's restructure how we take local tax, give it to the state, and fairly send it back down to our schools so that, as I said, every 8th grade history teacher makes the same amount across the state.
Is Bow or Hopkinton part of that coalition that fought against it? I don't know.
I couldn't tell you. I don't know the history of it, but I'm glad to chat further later. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, one in the back.
You mentioned increasing net metering and public transportation. What other ways do you envision cutting back on our climate emissions here in this district?
That's an excellent question. I'm a huge fan of bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, and specifically e-bikes. If you haven't ridden one yet, it is life-changing. Try an e-bike. Just take one out, for a day. I think what we can do that is fairly low cost is protected bike lanes in all 3 communities. It's not really expensive to put in some bollards, little metal posts with reflectors, and make the lane safe to bike in. In Concord, and this is just because I've served the district for 6 years, I would say that Fisherville Road, Loudon Road, and Clinton Street are ripe for protected bike lanes. We need those there. That's local. Yes, absolutely. But big picture, our climate footprint in the state, again, we're in the middle of transitioning from gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles. So incentivizing that transition is huge. I did file legislation the last couple of years for New Hampshire to adopt the California Air Emission Standard. We are the only state in New England who has not adopted the California Air Emission Standard. This sounds and you're going to become a policy wonk when I talk about this, but what it means is our dealerships in New Hampshire who don't have a presence in another state like Mass or Vermont, Maine, if they don't have a presence in another state, they are the last to receive EVs in New England because Ford and GM will send their EVs to the states that are part of the California Air Emission Standard, and we get the leftovers in New Hampshire. That hurts our automotive industry and it hurts our transition to EVs because when people go to buy a car, they don't actually see and drive an EV on a New Hampshire lot unless it's a dealer that has locations in other states. So you have to drive yourself out of state to go try an EV. That means you're making a conscious effort to be an EV adopter, and let me tell you, that's not the way people buy cars. So we need to adopt California Air Emission Standard, and we need to incentivize the EV transition here in New Hampshire. Big picture, that also means we really do need to install a lot more charging stations because we have all kinds of people with range anxiety driving EVs and afraid they won't be able to charge when they're visiting New Hampshire. That's the wrong message to send. We really want people coming here with EVs and e-bikes. Then we want them to enjoy our great outdoors and not be sending fossil fuel pollution up into our air. That's the last thing we need. So there are opportunities for us to transition. I think part of this is leadership and having a real 10-year plan by the Department of Energy that talks about transitioning away from fossil fuel and away from cars as much as we can. Again, bike ped is a big thing to me. Question?
My question sort of goes back to housing, but you mentioned requiring new development to have a certain portion set aside for affordable housing. And how do you ensure that communities across the state are all pulling their weight when it comes to affordable housing? You don't have certain communities building 100% of affordable housing and communities like Bowen Hopkinton building none.
That's a great question. I think, let me repeat the question. Some folks couldn't hear it. How do we incentivize or set up a structure so that some communities, maybe Bowen Hopkinton, refuse to put in affordable housing, and other communities are shouldering 100% of the weight of all the affordable housing that we need in the state? And so that's a great question because it is a policy question. It's about the carrot and the stick, right? So we need to come up with an incentive that developers will want to bite into in communities like Bowen Hopkinton to do the affordable housing. And that could be something like a 20 or 25-year deferred tax, possibly. We've done TIF districts before for other reasons, so affordable housing is not that far out of the realm of possible. But then there's the stick. What is the cost if you don't do affordable housing? Are we going to start charging you some kind of impact fee for not participating? So we have the tools on the policy side. It's a question of crafting the legislation to ensure that everybody does take a fair percentage of affordable housing as we do those 90,000 units that we need. Great question. Yes?
Along the same lines, you say the word percentage. Do you have a number in mind for the minimum affordable housing in developing?
I'm going to defer on that question. Thank you. Her question was, do I have a number in mind for an affordable percentage? You know, if you had that 100 units, is there a percentage that's appropriate to be affordable out of that development? I think it's probably going to have to be a tiered structure depending on the total number of units, right? So there's affordability for developers when they're doing over 100 units or under 100 units. There's another tier that's over 20, under 20. So I'm not sure that we could just come up with a X% applied to all. I think it needs to be a nuanced approach that works to the financials because I want developers to do this. I don't want this to be a stick, but I also want to make sure that the financials for construction and labor for each of those tiers. So I'm going to defer on the answer, but I think it needs to be a nuanced one. Another question?
I'm curious about the imbalance in our legislature. I hear all these wonderful ideas. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I thank you for that. What's the likelihood that you'll have success based on the ratio of Democrats to Republicans?
That's a great question. Balance in the legislature. What are the odds that these awesome ideas we're discussing tonight will actually be able to get through because votes matter, right? It's really who shows up on the day and who's voting which way. I will tell you that up until about 2 weeks ago, I felt like I was dreaming pipe dreams on some of these plans we were putting together. But things have changed at the federal level. And again, Democrats are now out there, and independents who care about the future of education, childcare, housing. Even independents, people who don't want to affiliate with a party, are suddenly saying, you know what, I think Harris can lead this, and I'm going to vote for the people that I think can make a big change. So my perspective is this is the year. We are going to sweep through Concord, and we're going to take the governor, the House, and the Senate, and the Executive Council. We're going to have a wave. This is the year.